Denzel Washington was no stranger to the spotlight, but nothing prepared him for the life-changing twist that would come when he found a stray dog with a leash in tow outside a small shop. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon lead him into a world of secrets, danger, and a dark past that had been buried for years. As the dog, Buddy, guided him deeper into a mystery that could bring down a covert military operation, Denzel found himself at the heart of a movement that would change the way the world saw animal rescue. Together, Denzel and Buddy would take on forces far bigger than they ever imagined, and what they uncovered would leave fans around the world cheering for them. Denzel Washington had just finished shooting for his latest project and was enjoying a rare moment of peace. The sun was setting, and the air was cool as he walked through the quiet streets of the neighborhood near his home. He'd done the usual routine, grabbed a coffee, checked his phone for messages, and was now just soaking in the calm. It was then that he noticed something strange. A small, scruffy dog trotted by him, looking frantic. But it wasn't just any stray dog. The pup had a leash hanging from its mouth, dragging behind it as it moved. It looked lost, scared, and out of place on the empty streets. Denzel stopped in his tracks, his curiosity piqued. He watched the dog for a moment, its eyes darting around as if looking for someone, maybe even its owner. "Hey there, little one," Denzel said, crouching down a few steps ahead of the dog. The pup paused, looking at him with cautious eyes but didn't move away. The leash it carried flopped onto the ground in front of Denzel. Denzel reached his hand out slowly, trying not to scare it off. "You're a long way from home, aren't you?" he murmured. Denzel was used to seeing stray animals from time to time, but something about this dog felt different. Its eyes weren't just wary, they were pleading. It was as if the dog wanted help, and Denzel couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an ordinary encounter. The dog took a step closer, still cautious but willing to approach. Denzel slowly stood up, the leash still hanging from the dog's mouth. There was no collar, just the leash, no sign of an owner anywhere in sight. "Where's your owner, Buddy?" Denzel asked softly, now completely focused on the dog. He looked around, expecting someone to pop up, maybe an embarrassed owner who had let their dog wander off, but the streets were still and empty, no one in sight. Denzel hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. He reached out gently and took the leash from the dog's mouth. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, it looked up at him, almost as if grateful. "Let's get you checked out, huh?" Denzel said, his tone light but with a hint of concern. "You can't be running around like this without someone knowing where you are." Denzel crouched back down, reaching for the dog's collar to check for any identification. But there was nothing. No tags, no name, just the leash, which seemed to have been abandoned. Denzel looked around one more time, trying to figure out what to do. "All right," he said with a deep breath. "Let's take a walk, Buddy." With the leash in his hand, Denzel began walking down the street, the dog trailing behind. The dog was clearly more comfortable now, no longer hesitating. It was as if the dog had decided that Denzel was safe. Denzel's mind raced as he walked. How could someone just let their dog wander like this, especially with no collar or any identification? Something didn't add up. After a few blocks, Denzel took the dog to the nearest veterinary clinic. He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was something important about this stray. The pup was smart, and it felt like it was leading him somewhere, though Denzel couldn't figure out where. "Hey, Dr. Martinez," Denzel said as he entered the clinic. The vet, a friendly middle-aged woman, looked up in surprise. "Denzel Washington," she said with a smile. "What brings you in?" Denzel glanced down at the dog in his arms. Found this little guy wandering the streets. No collar, no tags, just a leash in its mouth. Thought I'd bring him in to see if he was microchipped or if there's anyone looking for him. Dr. Martinez's smile faded as she leaned closer to examine the dog. "Let's see what we've got." Dr. Martinez scanned the dog for a microchip but found nothing. She then ran a quick check for any markings or identifiers, but the pup seemed like an ordinary stray, just another lost soul in the city. As she ran through a few basic tests, she checked the dog's health. It was a mix of terrier, small but muscular, with a scar over its left paw. The dog looked up at Denzel, its eyes full of a quiet wisdom, and Denzel couldn't help but feel like it was trying to communicate something. "Nothing conclusive," Dr. Martinez said, turning to Denzel. "I'm sorry, but no microchip and no ID. We'll put up some flyers, but this pup could have been abandoned." Denzel's heart sank. He looked down at the dog, who was now sitting patiently on the exam table. There was something about it, something in its eyes, that told Denzel it wasn't just any stray. "What's the next step?" Denzel asked, his mind made up that he wasn't leaving without helping the dog. Denzel spent the next few hours at the clinic, helping the staff with basic paperwork and making sure the dog got settled. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. The dog had shown up at just the right moment, and it had led him to the vet, and to a place where he could help it. After much thought, Denzel made a decision. I'm taking him home with me. I can't just leave him here. Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Denzel smiled. Yeah, I think it's what he wants. The vet chuckled, clearly seeing that Denzel had already made up his mind. All right, you're officially his new owner, I suppose. Let me get his paperwork in order. As Denzel left the clinic, the dog by his side, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in days. The dog, which he had already named Buddy, seemed content, following him without hesitation. Denzel walked Buddy home, the dog trotting along beside him as if they'd known each other forever. Something about the dog's calm presence helped Denzel relax. There was no question in his mind. This wasn't just any stray dog. Buddy had appeared for a reason, and Denzel was determined to find out what that reason was. Later that evening, as he sat on his couch with Buddy curled up at his feet, Denzel's phone buzzed. A news alert popped up. Hollywood star adopts lost dog. What he did next left fans cheering. Denzel smiled to himself. What he did next might surprise a lot of people, but he wasn't concerned about that. He had made a connection with Buddy, and that was what mattered. Little did he know that this simple act of kindness would spark a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. The Online Storm. Denzel spent the next few days getting to know Buddy. The small dog quickly adjusted to his new home, curling up on the couch next to Denzel as they watched movies or played in the backyard. There was something comforting about Buddy's quiet companionship, and Denzel couldn't help but feel like this little dog had a bigger role to play in his life than he had first imagined. Buddy was a fast learner, picking up commands almost immediately, and Denzel found himself bonding with the dog in ways he hadn't expected. He hadn't had a pet in years, and he'd forgotten how nice it was to have something to care for, something that relied on him. One afternoon, as Denzel was preparing lunch in the kitchen, he decided to post a picture of Buddy on his social media. It wasn't anything special, just a simple shot of Buddy lying on the couch with a goofy look on his face. He didn't think much of it, just a casual post, something to brighten his followers' day. But what happened next was far from ordinary. As soon as Denzel posted the picture, he received a flurry of likes, comments, and shares. It wasn't unusual for Denzel to get attention on social media, but this was different. Fans began tagging their friends, sharing the post, and soon enough, the picture of Buddy was everywhere. People loved the look on Buddy's face, and they loved the idea of Denzel, the funny, charismatic actor, finding a stray dog and taking it in. Within hours, Denzel's post exploded into a viral sensation. News outlets began picking it up, writing stories about the adorable dog and how it was clearly bringing out a softer side of Denzel. Memes started circulating, fans posting pictures of their own pets in homage to Buddy. The dog, who had simply been a stray looking for help, was now the center of attention. Denzel couldn't believe his eyes. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, messages, and new followers. People were asking if Buddy had been adopted, or if there was any way they could help. Some even suggested starting a social media page for the dog, calling him Buddy the Rescue Pup, and turning him into an online sensation. A few days later, Denzel sat at his desk, staring at the growing number of comments and messages on his phone. Buddy was the talk of the internet. People were clamoring to know more about the dog, his story, and how he had come into Denzel's life. Denzel laughed to himself. This little guy has more followers than I do. It was clear that people were connecting with Buddy's story in a way Denzel hadn't expected. What had started as a simple act of kindness was now creating a buzz that reached far beyond Denzel's immediate circle. Buddy had become a symbol of love, rescue, and second chances. Denzel looked down at Buddy, who was happily chewing on a toy at his feet. It was then that a thought struck him. Why not do something with this newfound attention? Why not turn Buddy's story into something that could help other dogs in need? I think it's time to take this a step further, Denzel said to Buddy, who paused from chewing the toy and looked up at him, as if understanding. Denzel immediately started brainstorming ideas. What if they could use Buddy's popularity to raise awareness about stray animals? They could start a campaign, maybe even partner with animal shelters to help other dogs find homes. Denzel could use his platform to reach millions of people, showing them the importance of adopting pets and supporting animal rescue organizations. He pulled up his social media again, quickly typing out a post. Buddy and I have been overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support from all of you. Thank you for sharing in this journey with us. We want to use this moment to do something bigger, something that helps other animals like Buddy. Stay tuned for more updates on how you can help #AdoptDonShop and give rescue animals a second chance. He clicked post, then sat back, taking a deep breath. There it was, the first step in turning Buddy's newfound fame into a force for good. The response was immediate. Fans rallied behind the idea, commenting that they loved the idea of Buddy being the face of animal rescue. Within hours, major animal welfare organizations reached out to Denzel, offering their support and partnership. Social media influencers with large followings began tagging Buddy and sharing posts about animal adoption. Denzel was taken aback by how quickly everything snowballed. What had started as a simple act of kindness, taking in a stray dog, was now something much bigger. Buddy had become a symbol of hope for animals everywhere. Denzel spent the next few days working with animal shelters, creating campaigns to raise awareness and funds for rescue operations. Buddy's story was featured in news outlets, social media campaigns, and even a few podcasts dedicated to animal rescue. It wasn't long before a major animal shelter reached out to Denzel with a proposal. What if they teamed up for a national adoption event? Denzel could help organize a Buddy Day, where people across the country could adopt rescue animals, share their own stories, and raise funds for shelters. The day of the event came quickly. Buddy was the star, of course, but Denzel knew this was bigger than just one dog. This was about making a difference. Together with several animal shelters across the country, they had organized a live-streamed adoption event where people could watch the animals find their forever homes. Donations poured in, and within hours, hundreds of animals had been adopted. Denzel and Buddy appeared on television, in interviews, and on live streams, spreading the message of compassion and responsibility for rescuing animals. Buddy, wearing a tiny Adopt, Don't Shop bandana, became the face of the campaign, with his wagging tail and goofy grin winning hearts everywhere. By the end of the event, thousands of animals had found homes, and millions of dollars had been raised for animal rescue organizations. Denzel couldn't believe how much had been accomplished in such a short time. Denzel sat back that evening, Buddy curled up at his feet once more. The impact of the day was still settling in, and it was overwhelming. The little dog he had found in the street had not only changed his life, but also made a significant difference in the lives of countless animals. "I can't believe how much good we've done, Buddy," Denzel said, scratching the dog behind the ears. "You've turned your second chance into a movement." Buddy's tail wagged in response, as if agreeing with him. The world had cheered for them, and now Denzel and Buddy were ready to continue using their platform to help others. The stray dog with the leash had led Denzel down a path he hadn't expected, but it was a path that would make a difference. Denzel was still processing the whirlwind of the past few days. What had started as a simple encounter with a stray dog had turned into something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. Buddy, the dog he'd taken in on a whim, was now a hero, a symbol of hope for all the lost, abandoned animals waiting for their chance at a better life. But with the attention came challenges. The pressure to keep the momentum going weighed heavily on Denzel's shoulders. He wasn't just managing his career anymore, he was managing a cause, a movement that had grown beyond his control. The flood of messages, emails, and calls from animal shelters, organizations, and fans was overwhelming. People were looking to him to make a difference, and Denzel was determined not to let them down. It wasn't long before Denzel was invited to speak at a major animal welfare conference. It was one of the largest gatherings of rescue organizations, celebrities, and influencers, all coming together to discuss how they could make a lasting impact on the world of animal rescue. Denzel stood backstage, pacing nervously. He had spoken at countless events before, but this was different. This wasn't about promoting a movie or a brand. This was about something that mattered, a cause that had become very personal to him. Buddy sat by his side, quietly watching him. Denzel chuckled nervously. "You're the one with all the fans, huh? I'm just here for the ride." Buddy gave him a small, excited bark as if agreeing with him. Denzel's nerves began to settle. With Buddy by his side, he was ready to speak out for all the animals who needed help. The event started, and Denzel was soon introduced to a crowd of hundreds. As he walked to the stage, Buddy trotted along beside him, tail wagging. The audience erupted into applause, and Denzel couldn't help but smile. Thank you, Denzel said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'm not used to getting this much applause for just walking into a room." "It's all Buddy, really. He's the star." The crowd laughed, and Denzel felt the tension in his shoulders ease. He had always known how to entertain, but this time it was more important than ever. He had a purpose here, and he was determined to make it count. He looked at Buddy, who was sitting attentively on the stage, wagging his tail. "A little over a week ago, I met this guy," Denzel continued. "He was lost, scared, and carrying nothing but a leash in his mouth. And now here we are, talking about how we can help other dogs like him. I'm here to tell you all that you don't need to be famous to make a difference. You just need to care." The room fell silent as Denzel's words hit home. He paused, letting the weight of the message sink in before continuing. Buddy didn't ask to be a hero. He didn't ask to be famous. He just wanted a home. And that's all any animal wants: love, care, and a chance at a better life. It's our job to make that happen. Denzel's speech was met with loud applause, and when he finished, he felt a sense of fulfillment that had nothing to do with his usual achievements. This was bigger than any movie premiere or award ceremony. This was about making real change in the world. Afterward, he met with several animal welfare groups and discussed future collaborations. The attention Buddy had brought wasn't just about raising awareness, it was about taking action. Shelters needed more resources, volunteers, and financial support to help more animals like Buddy. Denzel and Buddy were at the forefront of a movement, and it was just getting started. Underscore 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 underscore. The following weeks were filled with meetings, phone calls, and more public appearances, but the more Denzel got involved with animal welfare, the more he realized just how much needed to be done. There were so many animals in need, so many shelters struggling to stay afloat. And with every event, every campaign, the reality of the situation hit harder. At one of the events, Denzel met an animal rights advocate, Sarah, who had been working tirelessly for years to improve animal rescue systems and adoption processes. She had heard about Buddy's story and wanted to meet him. "Denzel, I've been following your journey with Buddy," Sarah said when they finally met. "I think we can really do something big here together. We've got the platform, and we've got the right message, but it's going to take more than just raising awareness. We need action." Denzel felt an immediate connection with her. She was passionate, driven, and had the knowledge to make a real difference. Together, they brainstormed ideas to take Buddy's fame to the next level, turning it into a full-scale campaign that could truly impact animal welfare across the country. Denzel and Sarah launched a national campaign focused on encouraging people to adopt, foster, and donate to animal shelters. The campaign included a series of heartwarming commercials featuring Buddy and other rescue animals. The goal was simple: save lives. Through social media, television spots, and partnerships with major animal organizations, the campaign quickly gained momentum. Denzel's star power, combined with Buddy's growing fame, made the campaign a success. People were listening. Shelters were seeing an increase in adoptions, and the media picked up the story, sharing it with millions of viewers. With each passing day, Denzel realized that this wasn't just about Buddy anymore. It was about every dog and cat that had ever been left behind, every animal who had been forgotten. It was about giving them the lives they deserved. As the campaign continued, Denzel and Buddy became the faces of the movement. Their work inspired others to adopt, volunteer, and donate. Denzel couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come, from a simple stray dog to a nationwide symbol of hope. But more than that, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to make a difference, gratitude for Buddy's unwavering companionship, and gratitude for the love and support from the fans who had helped make all of this possible. As the campaign reached new heights, Denzel found himself thinking about the future. What else could they do? How could they continue this work, even when Buddy's fame began to fade? The answer was simple: they would keep going. Together, they had already made an impact, but Denzel knew that this was just the beginning. "Let's keep fighting," Denzel said to Buddy one evening as they sat on the couch watching the sunset. "Let's make sure no dog has to face the streets alone again." Buddy's tail wagged in agreement, as if he already knew their mission wasn't over. It had only just begun. The weeks following the launch of their national campaign were a blur of interviews, events, and media coverage. Denzel and Buddy were everywhere, on TV shows, news segments, social media posts, and even in commercials promoting animal adoption. They were the faces of a movement that was slowly but surely changing the way people viewed animal rescue. For Denzel, it was a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, he was proud of the difference they were making. On the other, he felt the immense pressure of the responsibility that came with it. The more success the campaign achieved, the more he realized that this wasn't just a temporary project. This was now a part of his life, a cause that mattered deeply to him. Through it all, Buddy remained his rock. The dog, now more comfortable with the spotlight than ever, was always by his side. Buddy had become a symbol, not just of rescue, but of hope, loyalty, and the power of second chances. Denzel found himself growing more attached to the pup with each passing day. Their bond had become something deeper, something beyond just man and dog. It was a partnership, a team, working together to make the world a little better. One evening, after a long day of interviews, Denzel sat on his couch, Buddy curled up next to him. He absent-mindedly scratched behind Buddy's ears as the dog let out a content sigh. "You know," Denzel said, his voice soft, "I used to think fame was all about movies, red carpets, and awards. But this is different. This feels like real work, like real purpose. Buddy lifted his head, staring at him with those wise eyes. Denzel laughed lightly. Yeah, I guess you already knew that. Buddy's tail thumped softly in agreement. Despite the success of the campaign, Denzel knew they had only scratched the surface. They had raised awareness, but there was still much more to do. The problem of stray animals was far from solved. Shelters were still overcrowded, and many animals were still being abandoned or mistreated. That's when Denzel received an invitation to a high-profile animal welfare summit in Washington, D.C. The summit would bring together politicians, activists, business leaders, and celebrities, all focused on finding long-term solutions to the problems surrounding animal rescue. Denzel knew this was a critical opportunity, a chance to push for policy changes, raise even more funds, and continue building on the momentum they had created. But he also knew that it wouldn't be easy. The political landscape was complicated, and not everyone agreed on how to address the issues. Still, Denzel felt the pull to do more. He couldn't just sit back now. The day of the summit arrived, and Denzel found himself in the heart of Washington, D.C., ready to speak to an audience that held the power to make real change. Buddy, of course, was by his side, and it was clear that the dog had become an integral part of Denzel's mission. As Denzel walked onto the stage at the summit, he was greeted with a round of applause. The room was filled with leaders in animal welfare, as well as influential policymakers. There were representatives from animal shelters, organizations, and even some large corporations that had pledged support for animal rescue initiatives. Denzel took the microphone, looking out over the crowd. Buddy sat obediently at his feet, tail wagging slightly, looking around as if he understood the importance of the moment. "Thank you all for being here today," Denzel began, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here because, like many of you, I believe that every animal deserves a second chance, a better life. But we can't do this alone. We need everyone to step up. Government, organizations, businesses, and individuals. We need to work together to solve this." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But it's not just about giving animals a place to sleep or a meal to eat. It's about creating a culture where we value every life, where we don't just adopt for convenience, but because we truly want to make a difference. And that starts with education, with policy changes, with a commitment from all sides to make this a priority. Denzel's speech was well received, and it wasn't long before the discussions at the summit turned into real action. One of the key topics discussed was the need for stricter regulations on pet breeding, as well as tax incentives for families who adopted animals from shelters. Denzel also pushed for increased funding for shelters so they could provide better care for the animals and ensure more successful adoptions. As the summit continued, Denzel was introduced to several key figures in the animal welfare space, including politicians who were eager to help pass legislation to improve the lives of stray animals. One politician in particular, Senator Harris, expressed strong support for Denzel's cause and offered to help push forward several of the proposed policies. "We need people like you to keep pushing us," Senator Harris said, shaking Denzel's hand. "You have the platform, the influence, and the heart to make this happen. I'm with you." Denzel smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He hadn't realized just how much power he had to bring about change until now. And with Senator Harris's support, it seemed like there was real potential to make lasting improvements in the world of animal welfare. By the end of the summit, Denzel and Buddy had made lasting connections that would continue to push their cause forward. As they flew back home, Denzel felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had accomplished a lot already, but there was still so much more to do. Buddy lay next to him, resting peacefully as the plane cruised through the night sky. Denzel scratched the dog's head gently, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You changed everything, little guy," Denzel said quietly, more to himself than to Buddy. "Together, we've started something big, and we're just getting started." Buddy gave a soft bark in response, as if to say, "You're not alone in this." The road ahead was still uncertain, but Denzel was no longer afraid of it. The more he worked with Buddy, the more he saw the potential for change. They had already made such an impact, and there was no limit to what they could do. The next chapter in their journey was about turning that momentum into lasting action. They had the resources, the platform, and the people on their side. Now it was time to make the world a better place, one rescue at a time. The days following the Washington summit were filled with excitement and anticipation. The new partnerships, the policy proposals, and the growing support for Buddy's cause were all positive signs. Denzel couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come, but there was something else lingering in his mind, something he couldn't quite shake. Buddy had become more than just a symbol of animal rescue. The dog had become a beacon of change, but as the movement grew, so did the challenges. Denzel was no longer just raising awareness. He was leading a movement with real power, and that came with its own set of obstacles. One morning, Denzel woke up to a series of concerning messages and emails. As he scrolled through them, he realized that a new, unexpected challenge had emerged. A well-known pet store chain, which had previously supported the campaign, had publicly reversed its stance on animal rescue, announcing that they were now pushing for a return to traditional pet purchasing rather than promoting shelter adoptions. Denzel's heart sank as he read the statements. The company's sudden change of heart had sparked outrage among the animal welfare community, and their influential campaign on social media had begun to divide people. Some argued that adopting pets from shelters was no longer enough. What they needed was stricter regulation on breeding and pet sales. The pet store chain's sudden move threatened to undo much of the progress they had made. Denzel quickly realized that the battle was far from over. For every victory, there seemed to be a new setback waiting in the wings. Buddy sat at his feet, looking up at him with those wide, knowing eyes. Denzel sighed, scratching the dog behind the ears. "I guess it's not going to be all smooth sailing, huh?" The puppy gave a soft bark as if agreeing, its tail wagging slowly. Denzel wasted no time. He knew that sitting back and letting the controversy unfold was not an option. He immediately reached out to Sarah, the animal rights advocate he partnered with earlier, and together, they began crafting a response. They had to act quickly. "We need to take control of this narrative," Sarah said as she met Denzel in his office, her expression serious. "The public needs to know that this company doesn't speak for the entire animal rescue movement. We can't let them undo all the work we've done." Denzel nodded. "We'll make sure people understand that the fight for shelter animals isn't about buying and selling. It's about providing homes for animals who need them." The next steps were clear. Denzel and Sarah began organizing a nationwide campaign to counter the pet store chain's reversal, focusing on the importance of adoption and the ethical responsibilities of pet ownership. Denzel, with Buddy by his side, took to social media once again. This time, however, the message wasn't about Buddy's rescue story. It was about the larger issue of pet adoption. Denzel posted a heartfelt message, calling out the pet store chain for undermining animal shelters and making it harder for pets in need to find loving homes. Adopting a pet shouldn't be a trend. It's not about buying the perfect breed or the perfect pet. It's about saving lives. Denzel's post read, "Buddy and I have seen firsthand how many animals need our help. If we stop supporting shelters, we stop giving those animals the chance they deserve." The post quickly went viral, and soon Denzel and Buddy were joined by thousands of others who shared similar sentiments. Celebrities, influencers, and animal advocates all rallied behind the cause, creating a storm of support for the movement. The hashtag #AdoptOnShop began trending worldwide, and the pressure on the pet store chain mounted. Amid the growing tension, Denzel received a surprising call. It was from a representative of the very pet store chain that had made the controversial statement. The voice on the other end was apologetic, explaining that the company had underestimated the public's response to their decision. "We didn't expect such a backlash," the representative said. "We're open to finding a solution that works for everyone. We'd like to meet with you and discuss how we can support animal rescue efforts more effectively." Denzel, although still cautious, agreed to the meeting. It was a rare opportunity for the company to backtrack without losing too much face. They could use this to push for more significant commitments to shelter adoptions and ethical breeding practices. "Let's see if they're willing to listen," Denzel said as he ended the call. "But we need to make sure they know this isn't just about saving face. This is about real change." The meeting was held a few days later, and Denzel, along with Sarah, went to the headquarters of the pet store chain to discuss the future. The representatives were clearly nervous but also seemed willing to make amends. They admitted that their previous stance had been poorly thought out, and they wanted to move forward with a plan that would better align with the values of the animal rescue community. "What do you suggest?" one of the representatives asked, looking directly at Denzel. Denzel smiled. "First, we need to focus on education. We need to educate people on the importance of adopting from shelters, not just buying pets from breeders. Second, we need to partner with animal shelters and work together on adoption events, with a portion of your proceeds going to support those shelters. And third, we need transparency. If you're truly committed to this, you need to show the public that you're supporting ethical practices every step of the way." The representatives nodded, taking notes. They seemed genuinely open to change, and Denzel could see that they were ready to take real steps to improve their policies. "We'll take these suggestions into consideration and begin putting together a new plan," the representative said. "We'll make sure that we're doing everything we can to help rescue animals and make sure that shelters are supported." As the days went on, the pet store chain publicly reversed its position, agreeing to support animal shelters, promote adoption events, and work with rescue organizations to ensure better practices in the industry. While it wasn't a perfect solution, it was a step in the right direction. Denzel and Buddy's campaign had not only survived the backlash, it had thrived. The movement for adoption and rescue had gained more ground, and people were beginning to see the importance of ethical pet ownership. That night, as Denzel and Buddy relaxed on the couch, Denzel couldn't help but smile. "We did it, Buddy," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We've made a real difference." Buddy let out a soft bark, wagging his tail in response, as if to say, "We're just getting started." Denzel felt like the wind had been knocked out of him when the pet store chain's announcement hit the headlines. They'd been so close to achieving their goal, so many animals had found new homes, and adoption rates were climbing. But the setback had made one thing clear: the battle for animal rights and shelter adoptions was far from over. However, Denzel wasn't one to back down, not when there were still so many animals in need. He took a deep breath, staring at the pile of messages and emails on his phone. It was time to turn this around, and he had a plan. Denzel, Sarah, and their team immediately began crafting a new, even more ambitious campaign. It wasn't just about undoing the damage from the pet store controversy. It was about making sure the message of adoption and shelter care reached more people than ever before. "We need to take this nationwide," Denzel said, pacing in the office. "We need to make adoption the default option. People should think about adopting a dog as their first choice, not their last resort." Sarah nodded. "We've been using Buddy's story, but we need to make it bigger. We need a movement, a full-scale push to remind people that there are millions of animals waiting for homes." Denzel's eyes sparkled. "Exactly. Let's put Buddy at the center of it. No, let's put us at the center. Not just me, but all of us. Get celebrities, influencers, animal lovers, everyday people involved. Create something that people can rally behind." They called it the Adopt, Don't Shop movement. Denzel would use his platform, Buddy's growing fame, and the power of social media to create a massive awareness campaign. An online and in-person push to increase adoptions, donations, and volunteer efforts for animal shelters. They were going to involve everyone. The launch day arrived, and everything was in motion. Denzel, with Buddy by his side, filmed a heartfelt video that would go out to millions of his followers. In the video, Denzel spoke directly to the camera, sitting beside Buddy, who was contently lying at his feet. "I used to think that being a hero meant being in a movie, having the spotlight on you," Denzel said, smiling softly. "But I've learned something important in the last few weeks. Real heroes don't wear capes. They have fur, they wag their tails, and they're sitting right next to me. This is Buddy, and he's just one of millions of dogs out there waiting for a family." Denzel's eyes became serious as he continued. "But it's not just about Buddy. It's about every animal in a shelter waiting for their second chance. We've got to stop buying for breeders. We've got to adopt, because those animals, those beautiful souls, they deserve it. They deserve a home." Denzel reached down to pat Buddy. "And with your help, we can make it happen. Buddy and I are here to tell you, it's time to choose adoption." The video was posted on Denzel's social media, along with a heartfelt caption urging his followers to adopt or foster pets and to visit local shelters. Within hours, it was everywhere. Celebrities reposted it, influencers spread the message, and fans shared it with their own networks. The hashtag #AdoptDonShop began trending worldwide. As the campaign gained traction online, Denzel received messages from across the country, from people who had adopted pets, from shelters that were seeing an increase in interest, and from other celebrities who wanted to help. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when a major national pet retailer reached out to Denzel. Unlike the previous company that had backed out, this retailer was determined to help promote responsible pet ownership. They offered to sponsor adoption events at shelters around the country, providing the necessary resources and support to bring attention to the cause. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice filled with excitement. "This is what we've been waiting for. They're offering to partner with us, and they want to help fund adoption events across the nation." Denzel looked at Sarah, then down at Buddy. "We're really doing this. We've got the momentum, and now we need to keep pushing." The partnership led to a series of nationwide events, Adopt a Pet Days, where shelters hosted adoption drives, celebrity appearances, and pet product giveaways. With Denzel, Buddy, and their new partner behind it, the events became huge successes. Hundreds of pets found their forever homes in just a few weeks. As the months passed, the campaign's impact was undeniable. Shelters reported a significant increase in adoptions, and social media feeds were flooded with stories of pets finding new families. Denzel and Buddy had sparked a movement, and it was growing every day. At one of the final adoption events in New York, Denzel stood on stage with Buddy at his side, speaking to the crowd. The energy in the air was electric. People were there not just to adopt a pet, but to be part of something bigger than themselves. "Look around you," Denzel said, his voice loud and clear. "You've changed lives today. This isn't just about adopting a dog. This is about changing the way we think about pets, about animals, about love. Thank you for being part of something amazing." Buddy barked in agreement, wagging his tail enthusiastically, as if to say, "We did it." Even as the campaign began winding down, Denzel and Buddy knew their work wasn't done. The movement had grown beyond just one campaign. It had become a lasting mission to change the future for animals in shelters across the world. Denzel had committed himself to working alongside shelters, animal rights groups, and policymakers to ensure that the message of adoption stayed front and center. They also launched a foundation, the Buddy Foundation, dedicated to funding animal shelters, rescuing abused animals, and supporting the ethical treatment of pets. With the growing success of their campaign, they had the resources to continue fighting for a future where every animal had a home. As the days passed, Denzel and Buddy's lives continued to change, but not in the way Denzel had expected. Buddy had become more than just a pet. He was a companion, a co-worker, a partner in this mission. Their bond had grown stronger with every step, and Denzel couldn't imagine life without him. One evening, as they sat together in Denzel's backyard, Buddy resting comfortably at his feet, Denzel looked out over the city skyline. "This is just the beginning, Buddy," Denzel whispered, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We've got so much more to do." Buddy's tail thumped softly in agreement. Denzel smiled to himself, knowing one thing for sure: the road ahead was going to be full of challenges, but it was one he was ready to face. With Buddy by his side, there was nothing they couldn't do. The success of the nationwide Adopt, Don't Shop campaign was undeniable. With hundreds of animals finding new homes, shelters running full adoption events, and Buddy's influence continuing to grow, Denzel and his team had certainly made their mark. But even with all their achievements, Denzel knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. The fight for better treatment of shelter animals, for responsible pet ownership, and for more adoption opportunities wasn't over. As the days turned into weeks, new challenges began to surface, ones that Denzel hadn't anticipated. Denzel had always been someone who thrived under pressure, but the weight of leading a nationwide movement was starting to take its toll. Fans, shelters, and even lawmakers were now looking to him not only to advocate for change but to drive it. One afternoon, as Denzel sat in his office reviewing emails and preparing for an upcoming speech, he was interrupted by Sarah, who walked in with a concerned look on her face. "Denzel, we got a situation," she said, sitting down across from him. "There's a new policy being proposed that could undermine everything we've worked for." Denzel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of policy?" "Some lawmakers are pushing for a new regulation that would make it easier for people to breed and sell certain pets with minimal restrictions. They argue it'll boost the economy and provide more variety in pet choices." Denzel shook his head in disbelief. "Are they serious? This is the exact opposite of everything we've been fighting for." "I wish I were making this up," Sarah replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "The policy's gaining support. Some of the big pet retailers are backing it too. It's a big push to legalize easier breeding practices." Denzel leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. They had just won a battle, but it seemed like the war was far from over. The political landscape was shifting, and they were about to face a new wave of opposition. "We need to stop this before it gains more traction," Denzel said, determination rising in his voice. "This goes against everything we stand for. We've worked too hard to let this slip through our fingers." Denzel's next few days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and brainstorming sessions. He knew they had to act quickly. If this policy gained any real momentum, it could reverse everything they had accomplished. Shelters could lose funding, and adoption rates could fall as breeders flooded the market with even more pets, exacerbating the overcrowding problem in shelters. Sarah immediately started gathering data, reports, and expert opinions to build their case against the policy. They would need facts, figures, and a strong, unified front to challenge this proposal. Meanwhile, Denzel began reaching out to influential figures in the animal welfare community, lawmakers, animal rights advocates, and other celebrities who had supported their cause. He knew they needed to mobilize the public again, rallying people who cared about animal welfare to speak out. Within a week, Denzel and Sarah organized a massive rally on the steps of a prominent building in Washington, D.C. It would be the perfect opportunity to gather support, raise awareness, and send a strong message to the lawmakers backing the new policy. Denzel stood at the podium with Buddy by his side, facing a sea of people who had come to show their support. There were signs, banners, and a feeling of unity in the air. Fans, activists, and even families who had adopted pets from shelters gathered to stand against the proposed regulation. They were here to fight for what was right. "We've come together because we believe in a future where every pet has a loving home," Denzel said, his voice loud and clear. "Where breeding practices are ethical, where shelters are supported, and where people choose adoption over buying. We will not let this policy pass. Not on our watch." Buddy barked loudly, his tail wagging as if echoing Denzel's words. The crowd erupted into applause, and Denzel felt a surge of energy flow through him. This was what he had worked for. This was the fight that mattered. As he continued speaking, Denzel looked out over the crowd, seeing the faces of people who were as passionate as he was. He knew that together, they could make a difference, but it wouldn't be easy. The fight for the future of shelter animals was just beginning. As the rally continued, Denzel noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Senator Harris, the same politician who had supported their campaign for ethical pet adoption months ago. She had been a key ally in pushing for new policies that supported animal shelters and adoption initiatives, and now it seemed she was back in the fight. She walked up to Denzel after his speech, her expression serious but determined. "Denzel, I'm with you on this," she said. "I've already been speaking with some of my colleagues about the dangers of this new regulation. We can't let this happen. We're going to fight this." Denzel nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "Thank you. We need all the help we can get." Together, they worked to rally more support from lawmakers, experts, and the public. Denzel knew that if they could convince just a few key politicians to side with them, they could sway the outcome. They had to act quickly. As pressure mounted, the lawmakers who had initially supported the new policy began to waver. More and more people were speaking out, and the weight of public opinion was beginning to shift. The media coverage of the rally and the growing online movement helped amplify the message. After several tense days of lobbying and phone calls, Denzel and his team received some good news. The proposed regulation had been tabled, pending further investigation. The decision to ease breeding restrictions was put on hold for the time being, and lawmakers agreed to hold public hearings on the issue. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a win. They had stopped the policy from moving forward, at least for now. That evening, as Denzel sat on the porch with Buddy, watching the sunset, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The fight for shelter animals was ongoing, and there would always be new challenges to face, but tonight he felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. "This isn't over, Buddy," Denzel said, scratching the dog's ears. "But we made it through this round. Together we'll keep fighting." Buddy wagged his tail as if agreeing. Denzel knew there would be more battles ahead, but for now he had a moment to enjoy the victory. He had learned something important during this journey. Fighting for the voiceless, for those who can't fight for themselves, was a cause worth every ounce of energy, and with Buddy by his side, he knew they were unstoppable. The days following the rally in Washington felt like a much-needed breather for Denzel and Buddy. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The fight to raise awareness for shelter animals, to push for stronger policies, and to change the narrative around pet ownership was a marathon, not a sprint. But Denzel couldn't help but feel a surge of optimism. The success of the rally, the continued public support, and the political backing they had garnered were steps in the right direction. Yet, as always, just when everything seemed to be going well, life threw them an unexpected curveball. It started with a phone call late one evening as Denzel was relaxing at home with Buddy. Denzel was in the middle of scrolling through his phone when his screen lit up with an unknown number. Curious, he answered. "Hello?" Denzel said, his voice casual. There was a brief pause before a voice on the other end spoke. "Mr. Reynolds, I need to speak with you about Buddy." Denzel sat up straighter, instantly alert. "Who is this?" The voice continued, calm and composed, but with an underlying sense of urgency. "Let's just say I have information that could change everything for you. Information about the dog, about his past." Denzel's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it dropped a bombshell. "Let's just say Buddy wasn't always the stray you think he is. If you want the truth, meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the old warehouse on 12th and Pike. Come alone. No one else can know about this. If you want to find out, you'll have to come." The call ended abruptly, leaving Denzel stunned and confused. Buddy, who had been curled up at his feet, looked up at him with those large, innocent eyes, oblivious to the conversation that had just taken place. Denzel sat there in silence for a long moment, the phone still in his hand. The words echoed in his mind. "Buddy wasn't always the stray you think he is." What could that possibly mean? Buddy had been rescued off the streets, with no clear history or background. How could there be more to his story? As Denzel's mind raced, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was important. The timing of the call, just when their campaign had reached new heights, felt too coincidental. But who could be calling him? And why now? Buddy wagged his tail, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to shift in ways he couldn't understand. The next morning, Denzel found himself standing in front of the old warehouse on 12th and Pike, his heart pounding in his chest. It was an area of the city he wasn't familiar with, and the abandoned building looked run down, covered in grime and graffiti. Denzel hesitated for a moment, but then Buddy nudged him with his nose, as if urging him forward. Denzel smiled weakly, kneeling down to pet the dog. "Guess we're in this together, huh, Buddy?" Denzel whispered, his voice filled with both concern and curiosity. The door to the warehouse creaked as Denzel pushed it open, his footsteps echoing inside. It was dark and dusty, the air thick with the smell of decay. He called out, but there was no response. "I'm here," Denzel said cautiously, his voice low. "What do you want to tell me?" After a moment of silence, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, a man wearing a hood and sunglasses. Denzel instinctively tensed, his hand resting on Buddy's collar. "You're the one who called me," Denzel said, keeping his tone steady. The man nodded, though his face remained mostly obscured. "I have information you won't believe. But first, let's get one thing straight. I'm not here to hurt you or Buddy. I'm here to give you the truth." Denzel felt a sense of unease. "What do you know about Buddy?" The man hesitated, then took a few steps forward. "Buddy is no ordinary dog. He was once part of something much bigger, a project, a very secret project." Denzel's mind spun. "What do you mean? Buddy was just a stray. He's not part of any project. I found him on the street." The man shook his head. "No, you didn't. He was trained for something that only a few people knew about. He was meant to be part of a special unit, but he escaped. He ran away when the project collapsed." Denzel's heart skipped a beat. "You're telling me Buddy was part of a government project? A trained dog?" The man finally pulled down his hood, revealing a familiar face, one that Denzel recognized from years ago. It was someone from Denzel's past, someone he had worked with on various charity events. The man had always been in the background, but now, standing in front of Denzel, he was the bearer of shocking news. "Yes, I'm telling you, Buddy was never just a stray. He was a test subject, part of an experiment designed to create highly trained dogs for military and security purposes. But something went wrong, and Buddy escaped. He found his way to the streets, where he's been ever since." Denzel felt the weight of the revelation hit him like a ton of bricks. Buddy, the dog he had grown so attached to, was not just a lost animal. He was part of something dark and dangerous, something that had been hidden from the public for years. Denzel's protected instincts kicked in immediately. "So what now? You expect me to hand Buddy over?" The man stepped forward. "No, I don't want Buddy. But you need to understand that there are people who will come after him. People who want him back. People who will do anything to get their hands on him." Denzel stood tall, his jaw clenched. "I don't care who they are. Buddy stays with me. I'm not going to let anyone take him." The man nodded, his expression somber. "I knew you'd say that. Just be careful, Denzel. There's more at play here than you realize. Buddy's past might come back to haunt both of you." With that, the man turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Denzel standing in the cold, dark warehouse with Buddy at his side. As Denzel and Buddy walked back to his car, the weight of the conversation lingered in the air. The revelation about Buddy's past was a game-changer. Denzel had thought he knew everything about his new dog, how he had been lost and needed a home. But now he was part of something much bigger. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He would do everything in his power to protect Buddy. No one was taking him away. And as for the movement they had started, it would continue. Denzel wasn't going to let this new revelation stop them. In fact, it might just make their mission even more important. But for now, the road ahead was filled with unknowns, and Denzel knew he had to be ready for whatever came next. The days following the revelation about Buddy's past were filled with tension. Denzel couldn't shake the conversation he'd had in the warehouse. A trained military dog, part of an experiment, and now abandoned on the streets. The more Denzel thought about it, the more questions piled up. Who was behind the project? Why had Buddy been abandoned? And most importantly, why had the man reached out to him now? Buddy, oblivious to the weight of the situation, lay by Denzel's feet, chewing on his favorite toy. The dog's carefree nature was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Denzel's mind. But as much as Denzel wanted to focus on the campaign, on the movement that had already changed so many lives, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something dark was still out there, something connected to Buddy's past. Denzel's first priority was finding out more about the project Buddy had been a part of. He reached out to his contacts, asking around about military or government projects involving animals, but every lead turned up nothing. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to erase any trace of the program. He tried searching through his old connections, people he had worked with in the past, friends in high places, but every time he mentioned the project, the conversation would either be cut short or ignored. It was becoming clear that whatever had happened with Buddy was something people wanted to keep buried. Just when Denzel was about to give up, he received an encrypted email from an anonymous sender. The subject line was simple: the truth about Buddy. Denzel hesitated but clicked on the email, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through the brief message. "There's a lot you don't know about Buddy. If you want answers, you need to go to the old research facility in Barrington. Everything you're looking for is there. No name, no return address, just a set of coordinates and a place. Barrington. Denzel felt a rush of adrenaline. Barrington was a small, forgotten town about 2 hours outside the city, known for its abandoned military research facility. He had heard rumors about it before, whispers of shady experiments and forgotten projects, but nothing concrete. Buddy stood up, sensing Denzel's change in mood. He nudged his hand with his nose, and Denzel smiled, grateful for the dog's silent support. "I guess we're doing this, Buddy," Denzel said, his voice firm. "It's time to get some answers." The drive to Barrington felt longer than it actually was. As Denzel and Buddy navigated through winding roads and quiet, empty streets, a sense of unease began to settle over him. The town itself was run down, with peeling paint and abandoned storefronts. It was as if the entire place had been forgotten by time. Finally, they reached the outskirts of Barrington, and Denzel pulled up in front of the overgrown gates of the research facility. The place was eerily silent, a hulking structure of concrete and steel, long abandoned. The facility had been closed off years ago after a series of controversies and scandals, but the rumors about the dark secrets hidden within its walls had never quite faded. Denzel parked the car, Buddy sitting alert beside him. Denzel felt a chill as he looked at the building. There was no turning back now. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and gave Buddy a reassuring pat. "Stay close, all right?" Denzel muttered, opening the door. "We're going to find out what happened." The air inside the facility was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. The building had long been abandoned, but signs of its former purpose were still evident. Rusted metal doors, faded warning signs, and the occasional shattered glass pane littered the hallways. Denzel moved cautiously, Buddy walking at his side. The flashlight flickered as Denzel made his way deeper into the facility. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, and Denzel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they moved through the corridors, they reached a room labeled Research and Development. The door was slightly ajar, and Denzel pushed it open, his heart racing. Inside, the room was filled with old equipment, papers, and forgotten files scattered across tables. The walls were lined with dusty, worn-out cabinets, many of which had been left open. Denzel approached the nearest cabinet and opened it, revealing a collection of old files. His hand shook as he flipped through them, finding references to various animal research projects, but nothing about Buddy. He moved to the next file, his pulse quickening, and then he found it. A folder labeled Project Canis. He opened it carefully, scanning the pages. There he found detailed documents outlining the purpose of the project, an initiative to develop highly trained dogs for military and intelligence purposes. The documents included information about Buddy, his training, and the success rate of the project. There were photos too, images of Buddy as a young pup, labeled with a number instead of a name. Denzel stared at the photos, a sense of disbelief washing over him. Buddy hadn't been a stray at all. He had been bred, trained, and conditioned for a purpose he had never asked for. His history was buried in these papers, hidden from the world. The documents mentioned that the project had been deemed too controversial and shut down, but Buddy had escaped. The more Denzel read, the clearer it became. Buddy wasn't just any dog. He had been part of a government program that had been pushed to the brink of something sinister. Suddenly, a voice behind him made him jump. "You shouldn't be here." Denzel spun around to find the man from the warehouse standing in the doorway, his face as serious as ever. "You again," Denzel said, feeling a wave of frustration. "What is this? What's the real story behind Buddy?" The man stepped into the room, his expression conflicted. "You've uncovered the truth, but you don't know the whole story yet. You need to understand that what Buddy went through wasn't just about training. There are people who will come after him, and after you if they think you know too much." Denzel looked down at Buddy, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, watching the interaction with his usual calm demeanor. The dog had no idea how much danger surrounded him, and neither did Denzel until now. The man's words hung in the air. "You've been given a choice, Denzel. You can walk away from all of this, or you can face the people who created this nightmare and end it once and for all. But it won't be easy." Denzel's mind raced. He had always known that there was more to Buddy's story than he realized, but now he had a choice to make, one that could change everything. Buddy looked up at him, tail wagging slightly, as if telling him to make the right choice. Denzel took a deep breath. "I'm not walking away." And just like that, the path ahead became clearer, one that would lead him deep into a web of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas. But with Buddy by his side, Denzel knew they were ready for whatever came next. Denzel knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The documents he had uncovered about Buddy's past only scratched the surface, and the man's warning about dangerous people coming after them echoed in his mind. It seemed like everything was about to spiral further into chaos, and the stakes were higher than ever. Buddy, ever the calm presence by his side, walked ahead of Denzel as they left the dark, abandoned facility. The sunlight outside felt almost too bright after the gloom inside, and Denzel squinted, the weight of the truth heavy on his shoulders. They had uncovered the truth, but now it seemed like they were stepping into something much darker, a dangerous game that neither Denzel nor Buddy had been prepared for. The project that Buddy had been part of wasn't just about creating highly trained dogs. It was about control, power, and secrets that some people were willing to kill to protect. Back at his house, Denzel sat in silence, Buddy curled up on the couch next to him. His phone buzzed repeatedly, notifications flooding in. A couple of news outlets had picked up on the story of the warehouse, and the internet had gone wild. People were talking about the mysterious project and speculating about the dog's connection to it. Denzel felt a pang of frustration. This wasn't just a story, it was his life now, and it seemed like someone didn't want it to be told. He rubbed his temples, trying to steady his thoughts. It wasn't long before Sarah called, her voice tense. "Denzel, listen to me," she said, her voice serious. "We've got a serious problem. I've been digging into this project you found, and it's much bigger than we thought. There are people out there, people in high places, who won't want you digging into it." Denzel frowned, his heart racing. "What do you mean?" "There's a reason this project was shut down. They buried everything, Denzel, and now you've uncovered it. You've opened the door, and they're coming for you." Denzel glanced at Buddy, who was resting peacefully, unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the horizon. Denzel had never been the type to back down from a challenge, but this was different. These weren't just the usual threats he faced as a celebrity or activist. This was a whole new level. People had been involved in something so secretive, so dangerous, that they would stop at nothing to protect it. "Okay," Denzel said, his voice resolute. "What do we do next?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "We need to get ahead of this. The only way we can protect you, and Buddy, is to expose the whole truth. You need to go public, get ahead of the story. You've got the platform to do it, and the world is watching. If you don't, it's just going to keep escalating." Denzel wasn't sure if he was ready to face the full weight of the truth, but he knew Sarah was right. There was no turning back. If he didn't take control of the narrative, someone else would. "I'll do it," Denzel said, determination filling his voice. "But we need to make sure Buddy is safe first. I'm not going to risk his life over this." The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. Denzel knew the risks of going public with the full story about Buddy's past. There was no telling who might be watching or who might be willing to go to any lengths to stop him. But there was also no turning back. The truth had to be told. Denzel arranged a press conference, inviting major news outlets and media personalities to attend. The plan was simple: lay out the full truth about Buddy's past, his connection to the military project, and how it all connected to the growing movement for animal rescue. The focus would be on the importance of protecting animals like Buddy and ensuring that no more creatures were subjected to unethical experiments. But even as Denzel prepared for the big reveal, the looming sense of danger never left. Late at night, he'd find himself glancing over his shoulder, wondering who might be lurking in the shadows. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound outside the window, felt like a potential threat. And through it all, Buddy stayed by his side, unaware of the dark forces at play. The day of the press conference arrived, and Denzel stood in front of a large crowd of reporters, cameras, and microphones, Buddy sitting calmly at his feet. He had spent the entire morning preparing his speech, but now, standing there in front of everyone, he felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Was he doing the right thing? Was it too late to back out? Buddy nudged his leg, as if sensing his unease, and Denzel smiled. He was doing this for Buddy, for every animal that had ever been mistreated or abandoned. He wasn't alone in this fight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Denzel began, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "I stand before you today not just as an actor, but as a man who's seen the power of second chances. This is Buddy. He's not just a dog. He's a survivor. He's been through more than most of us will ever understand." Denzel paused, looking down at Buddy, whose eyes were focused on him, trusting and loyal as ever. "I've learned a lot from Buddy over the past few months, but today I'm going to tell you something I've just learned. Buddy didn't come from the street. He wasn't a random stray. He was part of a secret government project, an experiment to create highly trained dogs for military and security purposes. He was trained, conditioned, and then abandoned when the project fell apart." Denzel's words hung in the air, the crowd silent as the revelation sank in. He continued, explaining the details he had uncovered, the people involved, and the dark truths about Buddy's past. "The truth is, Buddy isn't just a symbol of rescue," Denzel said. "He's a symbol of what's wrong in the world, of how we treat those who can't speak for themselves. And I'm here to tell you, this has to stop." The press conference made waves, but not just for the shocking truth about Buddy's past. It sparked a massive movement. Animal welfare organizations, lawmakers, and ordinary people rallied behind the cause. They weren't just advocating for adoption, they were demanding accountability for the projects that exploited animals like Buddy. The world was finally paying attention. As Denzel wrapped up the conference, the applause from the crowd felt like the beginning of something much bigger. It wasn't just about Buddy anymore. It was about standing up for every animal who had ever been used, abandoned, or mistreated in the name of science, power, or control. As Denzel stepped off the stage, Buddy trotted beside him, tail wagging. Despite the looming danger, despite the uncertainty of what would come next, Denzel couldn't help but smile. Together they had started a revolution, and now there was no going back. The world had reacted to the press conference in ways Denzel hadn't anticipated. The response was overwhelming. News outlets from all over were covering Buddy's story. People were praising Denzel for his bravery in bringing the dark secrets of Project Canis to light. But with the attention came something much darker. Those responsible for the project weren't pleased. Within days, Denzel began receiving anonymous threats, calls, emails, even messages posted under the alias Project Guard, warning him to stop digging into Buddy's past or face consequences. These messages were cryptic, but they all contained the same clear message. They wanted Denzel to back off, and they would stop at nothing to make sure he did. As the threats grew more frequent and more menacing, Denzel's resolve only strengthened. He wasn't going to let anyone intimidate him. Buddy was with him every step of the way, and together, they were about to face the people who wanted to silence them. One evening, as Denzel sat in his living room, reviewing the flood of messages and media coverage, his phone rang. He picked it up without thinking. "Denzel, we need to talk." Sarah's voice came through the line, sounding more urgent than usual. "What's going on?" Denzel asked, his concern rising. "I just got a call," Sarah replied, her voice tight. "They've escalated it. The people behind this, whoever they are, they're watching you, watching your every move. I think they know you're onto them." Denzel's stomach tightened. "What does that mean? What should we do?" "Stay vigilant," Sarah said quickly. "I don't think it's safe for you to stay at home right now. You're a target, and if they find out where you're hiding, they won't hesitate to act. I've got a safe place for you to go, but you need to trust me on this." Denzel swallowed hard. This wasn't just about fighting for animal welfare anymore. This had become personal, and now it was a fight for his and Buddy's safety. Denzel didn't waste any time. He packed a bag quickly, making sure to grab Buddy's things, his food, leash, and favorite blanket. As much as he hated to leave, he knew Sarah was right. The danger was real. The next few hours were a blur. Sarah arranged for them to stay at a safe house, a location hidden away from the prying eyes of anyone who might be after them. When Denzel arrived, it was clear that the place was heavily secured, an old secluded cabin just outside the city with no windows to the outside world and only one way in. Buddy seemed at ease as they settled in, curling up on the couch next to Denzel. But the tension in Denzel's chest wouldn't go away. The walls felt like they were closing in, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo with the weight of their new reality. As he sat there, staring out the window into the night, Denzel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. The following day, as Denzel tried to settle into the new routine, a knock at the door startled him. He grabbed Buddy's leash instinctively, ready to move if necessary. But when he opened the door, it wasn't who he expected. It was another man from his past, a former ally in one of the many charity organizations he had worked with over the years. Denzel hadn't seen him in ages, but there he was, standing at the door with an outstretched hand. "I know this is a surprise," the man said, his voice low, "but we need to talk. We need to finish what you started." Denzel stared at him, confused. "Who are you working for?" The man smiled grimly. "For someone who doesn't want you or Buddy to disappear. Someone who believes in what you're doing." Denzel didn't trust easily, especially not right now, but the man's urgency made him pause. "What do you know?" "I know that this isn't just a fight for animals anymore," the man replied, stepping inside cautiously. "The people behind Project Canis, they've been operating in the shadows for far too long, and now they're trying to silence anyone who gets too close. But we got information that could bring them down for good." Denzel listened carefully as the man explained how he had worked within the same circles, gathering intel on the secret project and the people responsible for it. His name was Henry, and he had been keeping an eye on the situation from a distance, waiting for the right moment to act. "They've been running these experiments for years, testing animals for military and intelligence purposes," Henry explained. "But it's bigger than that. Project Canis was just one part of a much larger operation. They've got connections in every major government agency, military branch, and even private corporations. If we're going to expose them, we need to go deeper than the surface. We need to take them down from within." Denzel was stunned. What Henry was saying sounded like something out of a spy thriller, But the truth of it was undeniable. These were powerful, dangerous people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. "Why me?" Denzel asked, his voice calm but filled with suspicion. "Why bring me into this?" Henry looked at him, his face serious. "Because you're the one who's already exposed them. You and Buddy. They're watching you now. They've made it personal. But I've been working on something that could help us take them down. I have the information we need. I can help you get the answers you've been looking for." Denzel felt a mix of disbelief and determination as Henry outlined his plan. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be safe. They were about to go up against an enemy with resources and power that could squash them without a second thought. But Denzel wasn't one to back down from a fight, and now, more than ever, he knew he had no choice but to press forward. Buddy had already been dragged into this mess, and he wasn't about to let anyone hurt the dog or use him again. "We do this together," Denzel said, looking Henry in the eye. "You, me, and Buddy." Henry nodded, a grim smile crossing his face. "Exactly, but be prepared, Denzel. This will be the fight of our lives." That night, Denzel and Buddy stayed in the safe house, the weight of the conversation still heavy in Denzel's mind. There was no turning back now. The people behind Project Canis weren't just going to let them walk away. They had made that clear. Denzel lay in bed, Buddy curled up beside him, the dog's soft breathing a small comfort in the midst of the uncertainty. The mission to expose the truth was no longer just about the dogs or the project, it was about survival. The game had changed, and Denzel had just become a pawn in a much larger war. As Denzel drifted off to sleep, he made a vow, whatever it took, he would protect Buddy, and he would see this through to the end. Denzel spent the following days in a haze of preparation. The weight of the task ahead hung over him. He had to expose the truth behind Project Canis, bring down the people responsible for exploiting animals like Buddy, and keep himself and his dog safe. But with every passing hour, the pressure mounted. The world was watching, but so were the people who wanted to silence him. Sarah had been invaluable, helping organize the groundwork for their next move. Meanwhile, Henry had been gathering intelligence, reaching out to contacts that might have information on the project's remaining operations. The plan was to hit them hard and fast, taking away their power and exposing the corrupt system they had built. But there was one thing Denzel knew for sure: they couldn't do it alone. They needed allies, people who were willing to risk everything for the truth. Henry had pulled a string with one of his old contacts, a former government contractor who had worked in classified operations. This man, Jason, had insider knowledge of the people behind the project and the facilities they were hiding in plain sight. Jason wasn't in the game anymore, but he still had information that could take the whole operation down. Denzel and Henry met Jason at an isolated cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place where they could talk freely without being overheard. Jason was a rugged-looking man in his 40s, with a deep scar across his cheek. He wore dark sunglasses, though it was evening, and kept his face partly covered with a hooded jasonette. "You're Denzel Washington, right?" Jason asked, his voice gruff. Denzel nodded, glancing at Henry. "We're here to make sure this ends. We need everything you know about Project Canis, the people behind it, the locations, anything you can give us." Jason leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You know what you're getting yourself into?" he asked, eyeing both of them carefully. Denzel's answer was firm. "I've got nothing to lose, and neither does Buddy." The mention of Buddy softened Jason's stance slightly. "You're gonna need more than just guts if you want to take these people down. They've got a whole operation set up across multiple states. Their hands are deep in everything from law enforcement to private contractors. They've got the resources to disappear people, dogs included." Henry interjected, "How do we bring them down?" Jason pulled a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. "These are their current hideouts, their supply chains where they've been breeding and testing these animals. But you can't go in guns blazing. This is a chess game now, and you need to play it right." Denzel flipped through the folder, each page detailing covert facilities, encrypted communications, and hidden operations. The task ahead seemed impossible, but with Buddy by his side, Denzel knew he had no choice but to go forward. "We'll take them down," Denzel said with resolve, sliding the folder back to Jason, one step at a time. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. They would need to infiltrate multiple sites to gather the evidence they needed to expose the people behind the project. With Jason's help, they identified the key targets, places where the breeding and training had been taking place. There was a larger facility in a remote location, a high-security building where the core team of Project Canis had been operating for years. This was where the real answers lay. They would need to strike quickly. Their team was small, just Denzel, Henry, Jason, and Buddy. They would infiltrate the facility, gather the documents and evidence, and get out before anyone noticed. It was a high-risk mission, but it was the only way to get the proof they needed to bring down the operation for good. Denzel felt the weight of the plan, but it was the only option left. They couldn't wait any longer. The people behind this operation had made it clear they were watching Denzel, and the longer they waited, the more dangerous it became. Denzel, Henry, and Buddy approached the facility under the cover of night. The high-security building was surrounded by tall fences and watchtowers, but Jason had provided them with a way in, a small service tunnel that ran underneath the facility, just large enough for them to crawl through. The entrance to the tunnel was well hidden, and after a tense few minutes of navigating the dark, narrow passage, they finally emerged inside the facility's perimeter. "Stay close," Henry whispered, his voice low but urgent. "We need to move fast." Buddy trotted beside Denzel, his nose twitching as if he sensed the tension in the air. The dog was calm but alert, ready for anything. Denzel couldn't help but admire the way Buddy seemed to navigate the facility like he had been here before. They moved swiftly through the hallways, avoiding guards and security cameras. Henry led the way, his old connections proving invaluable as he guided them to the central records room. Denzel could hear the faint hum of machines and the distant murmur of voices in the facility, but they remained undetected for now. They reached the records room, and Denzel quickly got to work, scanning the files and downloading as much information as he could. As he sifted through the documents, his mind raced. Each page was more damning than the last, filled with details of experiments, breeding programs, and secretive contracts. "We've got what we need," Denzel said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "Let's move." Just as they were about to leave, Denzel heard footsteps approaching. His heart pounded in his chest. They had to get out, and fast. Henry motioned for them to hide. They ducked into an adjoining storage room, holding their breath as the guards passed by. Denzel's hands were shaking, but he kept his composure. If they got caught now, all of their hard work would be for nothing. As the guards passed, they made their way back to the tunnel entrance, their escape route still clear. But just as they were about to exit, a door slammed open behind them. "Stop!" a voice shouted. Denzel's blood ran cold as he turned to see several armed security guards sprinting toward them. They had been caught. The facility's alarms blared, and the lights flickered to life, casting everything in harsh relief. "Go," Henry shouted. Denzel grabbed Buddy's leash, yanking the dog forward as they sprinted toward the tunnel entrance. The guards were getting closer, but they managed to slip through just in time. As they crawled through the tunnel, Denzel's mind raced. They had the evidence. They had the documents that could take down the operation. But they weren't safe yet. The chase had just begun. The adrenaline from the escape was still coursing through Denzel's veins as he and Buddy raced back to their safe house. They'd narrowly evaded capture, and although they had secured the evidence they needed, the danger was far from over. The documents they'd obtained from the facility were a gold mine, filled with damning information that could bring down Project Canis once and for all. But now they had to get that information out before it was too late. As Denzel slammed the door shut behind them and locked it, Buddy trotted around the room, his tail still wagging as if nothing had happened. Denzel, on the other hand, felt the weight of what they had just done pressing heavily on his shoulders. They had made it this far, but the real battle was just beginning. Denzel sank into the chair, letting out a long breath. "We did it, Buddy," he whispered, glancing at Buddy, who was lying contentedly on the floor. "We got the proof." But even as he spoke those words, doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. They were still targets. The people behind Project Canis would do anything to protect their secrets, and they knew that Denzel was the key to unraveling it all. He had already been warned that they would come after him. Now that he had exposed their darkest secrets, he was more vulnerable than ever. Just then, Denzel's phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "We need to move fast. The clock is ticking. I've arranged a secure way to send the documents to the press, but we need to act now. They'll be on to you soon." Denzel's heart skipped a beat. He knew this was the moment of truth. If they didn't get the information out soon, they might lose their window of opportunity. The authorities needed to see the files, the proof of the illegal experiments and the abuse of animals for military and corporate interests. But it had to be done carefully. Any mistake could mean the end of everything they had worked for. Denzel and Henry sat down to go over their plan. They couldn't afford to take any chances. The media had already caught wind of the facility raid and the mysterious files, but there had been no solid evidence released yet. If they didn't get the files into the right hands, the story would eventually be buried, and the people behind Project Canis would continue their operations without fear of retribution. "We got a deadline," Henry said, glancing over the plans that Sarah had sent over. "There's a press conference happening tomorrow. If we can get the documents to the media by then, we can blow the lid off this thing." Denzel nodded. "We'll make sure they can't ignore it." The plan was simple. Denzel would meet with a trusted journalist, someone who had been following the animal rights movement for years and had a history of uncovering corruption. They would deliver the files to the journalist, who would then leak the information to the press at the press conference. But the timing had to be perfect. If they were too early, they risked the story being lost in the noise of other headlines. Too late, and the documents might never see the light of day. Later that evening, Denzel and Henry made their way to the designated meeting point, a small, inconspicuous cafe in the city. The journalist, a woman named Clara, was known for her investigative work into animal rights abuses, but she had been operating under the radar for a while. Denzel had no idea how much she knew about the specifics of Project Canis, but he trusted her instincts. When they arrived, Clara was already sitting at a corner table, her back to the door, eyes scanning the room. She was a sharp, no-nonsense type of person, and Denzel could see the glint of determination in her eyes as she glanced up and nodded at him. "You got it?" Clara asked, her voice low and steady. Denzel nodded, handing her a small flash drive that contained the files. "Everything you need is on there. The truth about the project, the people behind it, and the animals they've been exploiting. It's all in those documents." Clara didn't take the drive immediately. Instead, she studied Denzel for a moment, her gaze searching for any signs of hesitation. Denzel felt the weight of her scrutiny but didn't flinch. He had already committed to this. Finally, Clara took the drive from him. "I'll get this into the right hands, but you need to understand something. Once this goes public, it's not just going to be about you anymore. They'll come after anyone who stands in their way, and you won't be able to hide forever." Denzel nodded. "I know, but we can't stop now. Too many lives are at stake." Clara stood up, slipping the drive into her bag. "I'll make sure the story breaks tomorrow. Just keep your head down. This is bigger than anything you've ever faced." As Denzel and Buddy made their way back to the safe house, Denzel's thoughts raced. They had done everything they could to make sure the truth would be exposed. The ball was now in the media's court, but even as he tried to relax, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The quiet weight of uncertainty hung over him. Would the media actually pick up the story? Would the people behind the project allow it to be exposed? The whole plan could collapse if they weren't careful. Buddy, sensing Denzel's unease, stayed close to him, offering quiet comfort. Denzel knew he couldn't do this without the dog by his side. Buddy had been his anchor through everything, through the chaos, the danger, and the fear. The following morning, Denzel awoke to the sound of his phone ringing. It was Sarah. "It's happening," she said, her voice urgent. "The story's breaking. We've got full coverage, live news, radio, and online streams. You need to be ready for the fallout." Denzel's heart raced. This was it. The truth was about to come out, and there was no going back. "I'm ready," Denzel said, trying to steady his breath. "Let's do this." Within hours, the news broke. The story of Project Canis, the covert government experiment using animals for military purposes, flooded the news. The files Denzel and Buddy had uncovered were out in the open, revealing the depths of the corruption and exploitation. The media couldn't ignore it. The backlash was immediate and intense. Calls for accountability rang out from every corner of society. But even as the public celebrated the breaking of the story, the shadowy figures behind the project were already mobilizing. Denzel knew it was only a matter of time before they made their next move. As the storm of media coverage continued, Denzel and Buddy braced for the inevitable. The world was watching, and while the first battle had been won, the real war had only just begun. Denzel looked down at Buddy, who seemed to understand the weight of the moment. They had come this far together, and they weren't stopping now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The news about Project Canis had exploded like wildfire, sending shockwaves through every corner of the media. Denzel and Buddy had done it. They had exposed the truth. The world now knew about the unethical experiments, the hidden military projects, and the animals who had been treated as nothing more than tools. It was a victory, but with every victory came new challenges, and Denzel knew they hadn't won the war yet. As the news coverage continued to pour in, Denzel's phone buzzed with messages, calls for interviews, requests for statements, and a constant flood of support from animal welfare organizations. It felt overwhelming, but Denzel kept his focus. They had a plan. The next step was clear: take down the people behind the project. But as the media storm raged on, an even darker reality loomed on the horizon. That night, as Denzel sat at the kitchen table, Buddy curled up beside him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The threats that had started with anonymous phone calls were now escalating. People connected to the operation weren't just hiding anymore, they were actively hunting him. Denzel knew that the backlash would come. He'd seen it happen before in the world of high-profile scandals. But this time, the stakes were personal. Buddy wasn't just a pet. He was the key to exposing one of the darkest operations in the world. As Denzel scrolled through his phone, scanning the latest news, a message caught his eye. It was a simple text from Sarah. "Be careful. They know where you are." Denzel felt the blood drain from his face. It was a warning, but the weight of it hit him hard. He had made himself a target by uncovering the truth, and now, with Buddy's past exposed, they weren't going to stop until they had silenced him, and Buddy, for good. The phone rang, and Denzel answered immediately. It was Henry, his voice low and urgent. "You need to get out of there now," Henry said, his voice trembling. "I've been tracking their movements. They pinpointed your location. They're on their way." Denzel's heart raced as he looked around his small, secure apartment. It was supposed to be a safe house, but the walls were closing in faster than he had anticipated. Buddy lifted his head, sensing the tension, and Denzel didn't need to say anything for the dog to stand up, his eyes alert and focused. "Pack your things. I'll meet you at the rendezvous point," Henry continued. "You don't have much time." Denzel rushed to grab the essential items, his phone, a few documents, Buddy's food and leash. As he rushed through the apartment, he glanced one last time at the windows, pulling down the blinds and securing the doors. It was too quiet outside, and the familiar feeling of unease crept in. As he hurried out the back door and into the alley, Buddy at his side, Denzel's thoughts raced. This was no longer just a fight for animal welfare. It had become a matter of survival. The people behind Project Canis weren't just going to let them walk away. They would stop at nothing to get their hands on the evidence, and they would kill anyone who got in their way. Denzel and Buddy met Henry at a nearby car rental office, just as planned. The city was on edge. The streets seemed quieter than usual, but Denzel could feel the tension in the air. He knew the people who were after him wouldn't be easy to shake off. "We got to go off the grid," Henry said as they slid into the car. "They'll be watching all the major routes, but there are smaller highways and back roads we can take. We need to get out of the city. Fast." The car sped through the streets, and Denzel kept his eyes peeled in every direction. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Buddy sat calmly in the back seat, but Denzel could see the dog's ears perk up as they passed each street corner. It was as if Buddy could sense the danger too. They drove through the night, the headlights of the car cutting through the darkness. They were headed for a safe house in the mountains, a remote cabin far from the prying eyes of anyone who might be tracking them. It wasn't much, just a small, isolated place, but it was hidden, and that's exactly what they needed right now. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, far from civilization. The moment Denzel pulled up, he felt a slight sense of relief. They were safe, at least for the moment. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and glanced at Buddy, who was already sniffing the air, taking in the new surroundings. "All right, Buddy," Denzel said, his voice low. "We're safe here, for now." As they settled in for the night, Denzel couldn't shake the feeling that they were only one step ahead of those who wanted to silence them. He and Henry set up the cabin, fortifying it with the few supplies they had on hand. The windows were boarded up, the doors locked, and the surrounding woods were quiet, too quiet. Denzel couldn't relax. His mind kept turning over the new threat. They had exposed the truth, but the price of that truth was far steeper than Denzel had imagined. In the days that followed, Denzel and Henry worked tirelessly, moving quickly to secure their position and continue their efforts to expose the people behind Project Canis. Sarah worked in the background, gathering more intel and making sure the story continued to get attention. The media wasn't letting up, and the public pressure was mounting on the people who had been exposed. Denzel spent every moment on edge, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the next strike. The threats kept coming, but now he felt more determined than ever. He wasn't going to let the people who created Project Canis win. They had already hurt so many animals, destroyed so many lives, and Buddy was a symbol of the fight against that cruelty. As the days passed, Denzel knew the final confrontation was inevitable, but when it came, he would be ready. With Buddy at his side and the truth on his side, they would bring down the corrupt forces once and for all. On the final day, Denzel received a phone call from Sarah, her voice urgent but calm. "They've made their move. They're coming for you," she said, "but you've got one last shot. You've got the evidence. You've got everything you need to finish this. The world is waiting for you to take them down." Denzel stood by the window of the cabin, looking out into the wilderness. He knew what he had to do. The final push wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about taking down the people behind it and making sure that the abuse, the corruption, and the cruelty stopped once and for all. With Buddy by his side, Denzel was ready for whatever came next. It was time to end this fight. Denzel stood at the window, looking out at the forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the cabin. It was the calm before the storm, and Denzel knew that within hours, everything would change. The truth was out, and now it was time to make sure those who had done this, the ones behind Project Canis, were held accountable. He glanced down at Buddy, who was resting at his feet, calm and steady as always. Denzel's bond with the dog had become something deeper over the past few weeks. They weren't just allies in a fight. They were partners in this. Buddy had been the catalyst for everything that had happened. Without him, none of this would have ever started. And now together, they were going to end it. In the days since they'd reached the safe house, Denzel and Henry had been working around the clock. The evidence had been sent to every major media outlet, and there was no turning back now. The truth had been exposed, but the people behind the project weren't going to just roll over. They would come for Denzel, and they would do whatever it took to silence him. Henry had been keeping a low profile, reaching out to his contacts and ensuring that the right people were prepared for the fallout. But Denzel couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, something that would require more than just information to take down. As the night wore on, Denzel knew the time had come. The moment of truth was drawing near. "Are you ready?" Henry asked, standing next to him. Denzel looked at him and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be. This has gone on long enough. It's time to end this." Henry pulled out a piece of paper, his eyes scanning it quickly before he looked up. "We have the information we need to expose them, but we need to act fast. They're moving their operations and covering their tracks. They won't make it easy." Denzel took a deep breath. The path they were about to walk down wasn't going to be simple. They had to hit them hard and fast, take down the people responsible for Project Canis, and make sure the world knew the truth. "We'll get it done," Denzel said, his voice firm. Buddy stood up from where he had been lying, sensing the tension in the air. Denzel smiled at him, feeling a sense of gratitude for the dog's quiet strength. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Just as Denzel was about to leave the cabin, the sound of a knock at the door froze him in his tracks. It was late, too late for visitors. He exchanged a glance with Henry, who motioned for him to stay quiet. Denzel moved cautiously toward the door, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. Whoever it wasn't good news. Slowly he cracked the door open, his hand on the handle, ready for anything. When he saw who it was, his heart skipped a beat. It was Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "They found us," she said, her voice shaking. "They're already here." Before Denzel could react, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the cabin. Footsteps that weren't alone. "Go," Henry shouted. Without thinking, Denzel grabbed Buddy's leash and ran toward the back door, pulling Sarah along with him. The cabin was surrounded, and they didn't have much time. They had to get out, and fast. They sprinted through the dense woods behind the cabin, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. Denzel could hear the sound of boots crunching on the gravel behind them. The people after them weren't wasting any time. Buddy ran ahead, his keen senses guiding them through the dark forest, his tail held high like a beacon in the night. Denzel barely noticed the branches scratching at his face as they moved deeper into the woods. "Keep up," Denzel shouted to Sarah, but his eyes were focused ahead on Buddy. The dog was leading them, just as he always did, and Denzel had no doubt that Buddy could get them to safety. The dog had been through so much already. He wasn't about to let Denzel down now. Underscore 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 underscore. An ambush. As they reached a clearing, the sound of the pursuit grew louder. Denzel and Sarah had almost made it to the tree line when they saw a flash of movement in the distance. The figures were closing in, too fast. Denzel's heart raced as he realized they were trapped. The woods weren't big enough to outrun them, and the escape route was blocked. They had no choice now. "We need to fight back," Denzel shouted, pulling out a small but heavy flashlight from his bag. He knew it wouldn't do much against armed men, but it was better than nothing. Henry grabbed a nearby branch, holding it like a makeshift weapon. "Stay close," he barked. Buddy growled, his fur bristling, as he stood protectively in front of Denzel and Sarah. The dog's protective instincts were in full force, and Denzel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude. Buddy wasn't just a symbol. He was a warrior, ready to defend those he loved. Suddenly, the figures in the woods stepped forward, their faces hidden behind masks. Denzel knew it was too late to run. They were about to make their stand. The group of masked figures stepped forward, their weapons drawn. Denzel's pulse quickened, but he kept his eyes on the leader, who was standing just a few feet away. "You've made a big mistake," the leader said, his voice cold and menacing. "We didn't want it to come to this, but you've forced our hand. You should have left well enough alone." Denzel didn't flinch. "I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever." The leader chuckled darkly. "You're just a puppet in a game you don't understand. But don't worry, we'll make sure this ends quickly." Denzel's grip tightened on the flashlight, but before he could react, Buddy lunged forward, growling fiercely. The dog leaped at the nearest man, sinking his teeth into the attacker's arm. The man yelped in pain, dropping his weapon. "Buddy," Denzel shouted. The dog released the man and stood protectively in front of him, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. Denzel could see the hesitation in the attacker's eyes. Buddy had thrown them off guard. This was their moment. Denzel and Henry acted fast. In the confusion they fought back, using whatever they could find to defend themselves. Henry swung the branch at one of the attackers, knocking him to the ground, while Denzel blocked another with a swift kick. The fight was chaotic, but they were making progress. Buddy, ever vigilant, was right there with them. He barked and growled, throwing off the attackers and making it clear that they were no match for his loyalty and determination. The leader, seeing that the tables were turning, made a final desperate move. He pulled out a gun and aimed it at Denzel. But before he could fire, Buddy lunged again, knocking the weapon out of his hand. Denzel didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, tackling the leader to the ground. "It's over," Denzel spat, pinning him down. The police arrived shortly after, having been alerted by Sarah's call earlier in the fight. The remaining attackers were quickly apprehended, and the leader was arrested. The evidence Denzel and Henry had gathered, along with Buddy's unwavering courage, had led to the downfall of Project Canis once and for all. As the dust settled, Denzel stood over the man who had been behind the operation, his chest still heaving from the fight. He looked down at Buddy, who was still standing by his side, proud and unwavering. "We did it," Denzel whispered. "We ended it." Buddy barked once, as if in agreement. The morning after the confrontation felt surreal. The sunlight streaming through the trees seemed brighter, the air fresher, and yet the weight of everything that had happened hung heavily on Denzel. Buddy, as always, lay by his feet, his soft breathing the only sound in the cabin. The battle was over. Project Canis had been dismantled, the perpetrators were behind bars, and the truth had been exposed to the world. It should have been a time for celebration, but there was still a lingering uncertainty in Denzel's mind. As the hours passed, the reality of their victory began to sink in. The press had covered the story extensively, and animal welfare organizations were calling to thank Denzel for his bravery in exposing the truth. Denzel's social media exploded with messages of support, fans praising him for his relentless fight. But it was more than just a public victory, it was a personal one. Denzel looked down at Buddy, who had become more than just a symbol of their cause. Buddy had been his rock, his partner in this fight. Without him, none of this would have been possible. "We did it, Buddy," Denzel said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "But I'm not sure what comes next." Buddy looked up at him, wagging his tail slightly, as if to say, "Whatever comes, we'll handle it together." The first thing Denzel did was speak with his lawyer and finalize the legal work to ensure that the project and the people responsible would never have the chance to rebuild. It was a long process, but everything they had worked for had paid off. The public support was overwhelming, and people were now fully aware of what had been happening in the shadows for so long. Denzel had become an unexpected hero, but it wasn't about the praise, it was about making sure the system couldn't exploit animals like Buddy anymore. Denzel took a moment to reflect on everything that had led him to this point. What started as a simple desire to help Buddy had turned into a full-scale movement that had shaken an entire system. He had taken on forces far more powerful than he had ever anticipated, but he had succeeded, and the world was changing because of it. But as he thought about the future, a quiet realization set in. The work wasn't done. There were still millions of animals out there who needed help, and their fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Denzel and Sarah met the following week to discuss their next steps. They had gained traction, but they needed a long-term plan to ensure the movement they had started would keep growing and making a difference. Sarah was already working on the details of a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting animal shelters, rescuing pets in need, and pushing for stronger regulations on pet breeding. "We've got the momentum," Sarah said, her tone full of excitement. "We need to create a sustainable program that will keep working long after this story fades from the headlines." Denzel agreed. "We need to build something that lasts, something that makes sure no more animals are abandoned or used for unethical purposes. Buddy and I have already started something big, but we can't stop now. The mission isn't finished." With that, they began working on the Buddy Foundation, a nonprofit that would focus on everything from rescue operations to education about ethical pet ownership. Denzel knew it would take time, but he also knew they were on the verge of something great. This wasn't just about Buddy anymore. It was about creating a lasting change that could save lives and protect animals for generations to come. As the foundation began to take shape, Denzel's life slowly began to settle into a new routine. His fame, while still a part of the equation, was no longer the focus. He was fully invested in the mission, and that kept him grounded. Buddy was by his side, as always, a constant reminder of why he was doing this. One morning, as Denzel and Buddy took their usual walk through the park, Denzel reflected on how much had changed in the past year. There had been moments of fear, uncertainty, and danger, but there had also been moments of triumph, and as he looked at Buddy, who trotted beside him with his usual enthusiasm, Denzel realized something important. The journey they had begun was far from over, but they were ready for whatever came next. Buddy stopped to sniff a tree, his tail wagging as he explored his world with excitement. Denzel chuckled to himself, feeling a surge of gratitude for the dog's unwavering spirit. "We're a team, Buddy," Denzel said with a smile, "and I'm proud of us." Buddy barked happily, as if understanding every word. Denzel's heart swelled with pride. In the months that followed, Denzel's life took on a new purpose. With Buddy by his side, he focused on growing the Buddy Foundation, partnering with shelters, and raising awareness about the importance of adoption and ethical pet ownership. The movement they had started had gained momentum, and Denzel had become a champion for animals everywhere. Together with Sarah, Henry, and a growing network of supporters, Denzel pushed forward, determined to make the world a better place for animals. There was still so much work to do, but with Buddy by his side, he knew they could accomplish anything. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: Denzel and Buddy were ready to face it together.